Hello, I'm Dave Hockey and I volunteered with GDTA for nearly 15 years now. I really like using the chainsaws and the brushers as well as maintaining them. It's been a great learning experience. I've used the equipment in the field under many different conditions and also performed the annual cleaning and service. Well, I've done my best to learn from many different sources. I'm certainly not an expert, and if you're in doubt, please refer to the steel manuals. I would also like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to volunteer for the GDTA, and I hope your time spent watching this video will help you perform the basic maintenance and so you can enjoy the work a little bit better. Now, our goals of field maintenance are as follows. First of all, and most importantly, is to ensure a safe operation for yourself and others around you. Second, to prevent equipment damage. Number 3, to prevent downtime in the field. And number 4 is to maintain optimal cutting performance. Now, before we start, let's be safe and we'll grab some thick leather gloves and we'll get going. Okay, now we got our gloves on. Every brusher comes with a brusher bag. Let's just quickly go through the contents so you can identify all of them. Of course, we have a Torx wrench and a spark plug removal tool. We have a tool that will stop the gearbox in order to change the blade. Some basic cleaning rags, and we've got a brush. You'll also have some spare parts. You'll for sure have a spark plug, a nut. You'll probably have a spare rider cup and maybe even a thust washer. And of course the handy dandy funnel. Now, you'll also have a spare blade. This one here is pretty well used up, but it is there. And there's also a guide in each one that will show you how to sharpen it. And we'll go more on that later. You'll also have your harness. You will have a file to do the sharpening. And you should have a small screwdriver as well to do some adjustments, which we'll talk about later as well. And a checklist of all the things that you should be doing on a daily basis to keep everything running at optimal performance. Okay, now, before you start any of the maintenance, let's talk a little bit more about safety. As you will see when I'm trying to show all of this, I'm picking up the brusher, which is approximately 5 feet long, and turning it around a lot in order to get to the different parts. You'll be doing the same in the field. So what you want to make sure is that you move over and maybe have 10 feet between you and your partner who are taking a break, and that way they'll be safe and so will you. So let's go through our checklist one by one, and we'll be able to answer a few questions. So the first thing on there is our visual inspection and cleaning. So this is a good time just to grab your brush and take a once over of your machine. So take a look at the housing, make sure nothing's cracked. Take a look at your gas cap, make sure it's on tight. Moving down, you'll want to have your trigger assembly and making sure that this is all working well. And then we move over to the business end of the saw, as they say. This is your deflector here, and you just want to make sure that it's on tight and it's not cracked or broken, and also to make sure that your blade is on and the rider cup is on nice and tight. As far as cleaning goes, again, we'll flip this up over and I'll just show you close in, but this saw is obviously nice and clean, but up in here, especially when it's wet, you'll have buildup, and you can just scrape that off with the handle or even your tool here. And then on the other side, you're going to have both your spark arrestor, which is in there, which we'll talk a bit more about later. And then this is your air filter here. It's a little bit different than the ones in the chainsaw. but all you want to do with your brush is to keep all of the sawdust and twigs or anything else that gets thrown at you away from the saw, so it just runs nice and cool. Okay, so let's take a look at our gearbox, and we have gearbox lubrication on the checklist. So on this saw and a couple of the other saws, this is the nut that you'll take off in order to add lubrication. But don't panic if you have a saw that does not have one of these. All that means it's a newer saw and it's permanently lubricated from the factory. So in this case, we want to check it first. So counterclockwise, we'll spin off the nut and set that down, and you look in there, and if you see grease right in there, then you're okay. If you don't see any grease at all, then you'll need to add a little bit. The grease we use is a steel provided grease, and the handy thing about this is that these threads match those threads, so we can just screw the tube on. Of course, it never works really that well when you're trying to show a video. But anyhow, we only want approximately 5 grams or 1/5 of an ounce. So you basically don't have to squeeze very hard to get much in there. So kind of like just putting on a little bit of toothpaste on your brush. So you can squeeze the end and turn the blade, which will move the grease around. So just squeeze gently, and when you've put in just a little bit, then that will be good for now. Unscrew that. Get your lid back on. This should be in the trailer, by the way, in the brusher box. And I'll take my glove off to get this on. Put that back on. Using our Torx wrench again. Put it back on. And again, just, you know, a good snug. It doesn't have to be torqued down. Most people over tighten most things. Okay, and that's it for your gearbox lubrication. Hi, time for a close-up. Okay, your cooling inlets, inspect them. Basically, the machine's going to draw in air all through this area here and even the top. And as we mentioned before, at the start of the day, just go ahead and use your brush to keep all of that clear. It's usually not a problem, but if you are in a very dirty or dusty area, it might make a difference. So just keep it clean. 3. Hello. When you start up your saw, you'll have the trigger lock on and the saw will start. And then you'll hit the trigger lock and it'll bring the saw down to an idle. Now at that point, if the blade is still spinning, then you'll want to slow it down and you may have to do an idle adjustment. These are all set in the shop and ready to go, but things change. So it's a pretty easy adjustment and you just need to look for the right screw. So on the housing here for the air filter, you will see a high and a low and then an LA. LA apparently is German for idle stop, but in this case, it's actually idle adjustment. So all you have to do is put the screwdriver into the screw in the LA slot down here, turn it counterclockwise, and you'll hear the engine slow, and you'll also see the blade stop. Once you get to the point where the blade stops, give it about another quarter turn, and you're good to go. Okay, next on our list is the anti-vibration elements. Now, these can't be serviced in the field. They have to be done by the dealer only, and we've never had any go wrong. So the likelihood of vibration in the machine being caused by these is quite unlikely. And you have to disassemble like 1/3 of the machine in order to inspect them. So in this case, we're not going to inspect them. We'll do that every year at the end, and we'll make adjustments if necessary. So next, we'll be talking about what does cause the vibration, and that is on the business end of the saw, and I'll show that to you right now. Okay, sharpening the blade and keeping the blade on. The most important thing to know is that anything that spins pretty much is going to have a left-hand thread. So you're going to want to do everything the opposite way. So this blade here is in nice and tight. It doesn't wiggle and it's on there firm. but we're going to show you a few things. So we put in the stop, and you'll move the blade, and then you'll feel it stop. Now again, you have to think opposite. Think opposite. Okay, so as I have these things come off here, I'll describe the parts for you so it helps. So obviously, this here is the nut. This is called a rider cup. This is called the thrust washer. Trying to hold the saw and not have everything fall off. Okay. Obviously your blade, we call this a brush knife. And here's your rider plate. You really don't want to have that come off. Just leave everything like that. Okay, so one thing I'd like to point out is the new saws will have these two parts together. So don't be alarmed when you go to replace this, that this is welded together. That's okay. I don't like it myself. So one thing you have to check on is if one of these breaks, or what usually happens is that this thing separates from here. And then when you go to replace it, you need to be able to take this one off and make sure that there's not the thrust washer sitting up there, and replace it with a whole assembly when you're done. So the old style like this is better in my opinion because it's separate. And what happens is, I don't know if you can see it here that well, I'm trying to hold everything, but right there, this part of the metal will separate from the cup. And it's really hard to see, but when you take it apart, you'll soon see that it's this hole is much bigger than it was before, and you'll see another piece hanging in there. So you'll take that off and you'll put a new assembly on. So with the blade, I'm just going to flip the saw here. Hopefully you can see it a bit better, and then I can actually hold it a bit better. Okay, so on the rider plate, there is a slightly raised piece in the middle. It's probably, I don't know, like 2 or 3 millimeters. It's not much, and that's what makes this tricky. So you're going to put the blade on, and you want to make sure that that is engaged with those two. Now the trick is trying to do this and not have it fall off while you're doing it. Then you can put your plate back. Then you put the thrust washer back on, and it'll help keep it on there. Okay. Then you put your rider cup back on. See, it already fell off. Okay. So let's start over. This is actually really good to show. Okay. Now, again, in the field, I do this with the machine laying on the ground upside down, so it's much easier than trying to show it to you in a video. At least that's my excuse. Okay, cup. Okay, see if we can all hold it together. And then we're going to put this on. Same thing. This needs to be on firmly, but you don't need to torque it on. It should actually get tighter as it goes. Now, the next thing I need to do is to try to put the gear stop in there. Okay. And there we go, it's engaged. And we're going to tighten it up. And you can see when it's upside down how much easier it is. But we're getting there. Okay, so that's what you want to make sure is that this is all just tight and together. And if it isn't, you'll soon know, because as soon as you start the machine up and you start cutting, the blade will just come off there and it'll just spin freely and nothing will work. Okay, so the other part I just want to point out is filing. And that is where. So there's only 3 spots on the blade that you need to file. So at the very top, you just need to make it flat on the top. And then you're going to do a 35-degree angle here and a 35-degree angle here. That's the only part that you need to sharpen. You don't sharpen this down in here. And what you want to do is, and this is the most important part of all of this, is what you're trying to do is you're trying to keep these 3 prongs equal length. And if you keep them at an equal length, the saw will run nice and balanced. If you sharpen one down too much, then what's going to happen is this is going to be off balance, and then you'll start to feel the machine vibrate. So one of the easiest ways of doing that is at least once a day, if not twice a day, is you flip the blade. And by flipping the blade, then you're getting wear on both sides evenly, and you sharpen it before you put it back on. Then you're making small adjustments each time, instead of waiting for the end of the day or 2 days later and then taking it off and sharpening a lot to get it back down to where it should be. That's when you have a chance of making more mistakes. So just do it. Every time you have a break, just go ahead and flip it, put it back on, tighten it down, and you're ready to go. In the box that the blade is stored in to protect it and you, there's also some directions here showing kind of the angle here of where the tips should be. So it'll help you filing. It'll give you some basic instructions on how to file it and what angle and that. So I think you'll find it helpful as well. And that's laminated so it stays relatively dry, but try not to get it soaking wet. Okay, and that's pretty much ready. You're good to go, and hopefully you learned some things here. And if you have any questions, there'll be senior people out in the field to help you out. Again, thanks for watching.